now we're going to try and throw a bowl. Already got the clay on the wheel and I've put it down. Just make sure it's somewhat in the center. And then we'll try and center it first. Just gonna wet my hands and we'll try and see if we can get this centered. Now when centering it, I try and center from the top down, using my hands to try and push the thing into the center. I'm actually putting a lot of pressure on this right now, particularly when I get down to the bottom. You can see it stripped off a big chunk of it. I put so much pressure on it. Well, the top is pretty well centered. All I got to do is get the bottom centered. There, I can feel it just went into center. This is much easier to do with clay that's somewhat fresh. This clay just came from Sheffield Pottery is the clay that I'm using. I just got it about 2 weeks ago. So it's got the right moisture content and so on. I've tried using clay that's like 5 years old. It's very hard to work with. You have to get the water back in it and so on. Now I'm going to try and make a hole down through the center of the clay by pushing my thumbs right down through the center. Hopefully down to the depth where the base will be. I'll make sure I got enough water on it so I can go right on down. And now I just push my thumbs right down. I'm going to push the sides down a little bit too until hopefully I've got a hole in the center that goes right down to the depth, or at least almost the depth that it'll be for the bowl. And now, rather than trying to push it out like you would with a plate, we're going to pull the hole so that it gets bigger. Make sure I got enough water on it. I'm going to take these fingers here and I'm just going to pull it towards me while keeping this hand on the side to try and keep it straight. And you'll see I'm just expanding the hole now. And I want to get the hole as wide as the base of the bowl will be. So that in theory should be the bottom of my bowl there. Now if you looked at the bottom right now, I don't know if it can be seen well, but it's not really flat at this point. The next thing will be I'll flatten it out and get it down to the right depth. I actually have done this so much that I can guess pretty accurately at the depth. As with plates, you want to leave 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of clay between you and the bat. Doing these bowls, I'm using wooden bats. I actually made these bats myself I bought a big sheet of marine plywood and just made bats out of it by cutting it out in circles with jigsaws and drilling my own holes. Just clean it up a bit so you can see. So now we've got the bottom of the bowl made. If I took the water out of it, you can see that the bottom is fairly flat at this point. And I can flatten it out a bit with my fingers. I'm not completely happy with it. This also packs the bottom. I say I'm not needing this clay because it's only a couple of weeks ago that I got it. It's fresh clay. I find when I need it, I have more, I don't know why exactly, but I have more tendency to put air bubbles into it than to get them out. If I had kneaded this clay, I would have, once I got it kneaded, I would have actually turned it upside down from the way the cone shape formed in kneading, and I would put the point down and try and keep the cracks from forming in the base. You want to make sure that the base down here is very well packed by going over it a couple times, and that way you'll have less tendency to have the thing crack along the bottom as it's drying. Now we got to pull the sides up, so I'm going to get the sides wet. I'm going to use this part of my finger as well as these fingers, tips of my fingers, to just pull it right up in the air. I'll do it gradually a few times. It'll take me. This first time I just try and get it straightened out a little. You've got to keep the outside wet. If your fingers start dragging on it, then you'll get it so it'll get off center doing that. Now I'm going to pull it up one more time, the same way. As you're pulling, if you keep your fingers the same distance apart constantly, what it will do is if there's any unevenness in the sides, it'll pull it right up to the top, and the top will wobble up and down, but the sides will be of even thickness. So you'll get your wobble in the top rather than the sides being wrong thickness. So now you have to judge the distance between your fingers to make sure that you're really pulling the thing so that it's even going all the way up. And I usually slow the wheel down at this point so that I can feel, and as I'm watching it I can see that coming up where my fingers are, it's even. If you try and look at the top of the thing, you'll see it looks like it's wobbling. But once I get up to the top, that wobble will all become just an up and down of the top itself. And it's still real thick down at the bottom, so I'm going to pull it up again. Eventually this thing the sides will lean out to become the sides of the bowl once I get it up to the height that I want. So now I'll come up again. Notice I don't know if you can see it, but I'm bracing my hands, one hand on my legs, so that I've got myself braced and my whole body is the brace for it. Then once I get up high enough, I put this finger on the other hand so that it continues bracing. Where I'm pulling it up, it's even. At the top it looks like it's wobbling. So you got to keep your eye on where your fingers are coming up through it, and not necessarily on the top and what the top's doing. So once you get up to the top, then the top will straighten itself out. There you can see I've got it pretty tall now. Just feels like it's about 1/4 of an inch thick coming up. So I'm just going up to see if it's where I want it to be. Actually feels pretty good right now. You got to remember that the top here, as you lean the bowl out, this is going to get thinner, and the bottom here will stay pretty much the thickness you got it when you start. You may have to trim down the bottom a little bit down here once it's semi-dry to get it where you want. I'm just going to pull the bottom just a little bit more, get it a little less thick on the bottom. You can see the whole thing looks like it's really wobbling. Now I got to straighten my hands out because I don't want it to go off on the top. There. Now I've got the walls pretty much built so that I can lean them out to form a bowl out of it. I'll just take everything, all the water out of the inside. A lot of water in there. Make sure it looks alright. Yeah, it looks good. So now I will start leaning it out. So I'm going to get the sides wet. And I'm going to use my hands like this to lean the whole thing out, just like I do with plates, except more of it is going to lean. I'm pulling it out sideways. You want to do it several times to get it to where you want it to be. So my fingers that are on the outside are just bracing it. The fingers that are on the inside are the thing that are doing the stretching. You got to keep the walls wet while you're doing this. You want to do it as fast as you can so you don't get too much water on the walls, because if the walls get too much water, then they'll start collapsing as the clay gets softer and softer. And at this point, you've got to decide where you want to stop. Just as a challenge to myself, I always try and take the things down as far as I possibly can. The other thing I have to remember is that, can I get this thing off of the wheel once I'm done? So I'm going to once again take this off from the top of it, set it over here, hopefully not drop it, and then find my other piece. So that I can continue on and get the thing off the wheel easily. As I said before, I finally got tired of having the thing stuck on the wheel and I couldn't get them off easily, so I made this extra guard for myself out of an old piece of a bucket and a piece of wood. Now the thing is, you got to decide where you're going to stop your bowl, how big is it going to be, and what's the size of it. So there is a very, very wide bowl at this point. And I got to see if I can get it. I'm not going to take it any wider, it'll get too thin here pretty soon. I'm going to trim the edge just a little bit. Make sure that the edge is the same all the way around. Makes it look nicer on the wheel as it's throwing when it doesn't wobble at the top. The wobble is usually caused by the height and not by the width of the bowl. Okay, now we'll take the water out of the inside and smooth it out with the sponge going up. So it has a nice set of lines on it. Once the bowl gets semi-dry, at that point I decide whether I want to put some slip on it or if I want to keep it this natural clay color and do some other kind of decoration. At this point it's just a matter of getting the, I guess I'll call it the blank for the bowl, done so that it's starting to dry. And there are decisions that have to be made after this. If you're going to put slip on it, slip coating, then you have to do it when it's still somewhat damp, so that at least I do, so that the slip adheres. And the slip that I put on bowls, I make out of the same clay. All of these scraps that I take off the bowl, I use them to make my own slip, so that the slip matches the bowl.